You're listening to the Pure Fury Creations Entertainment Network. The views and opinions expressed on this episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or philosophies of the PFC Entertainment Network or any of the affiliates that make this show possible. This show has also been rated M for mature audiences only.
We don't talk about that. Welcome back to Shh, We Don't Talk About That. I'm Joanna.
I'm Natalie.
And we're here to talk about attachment theory.
Attachment theory. Yes.
Yeah.
What are you attached to? Because it ain't me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm kind of attached to you. Took a while.
Did it though? I don't know if it did.
No, it really didn't.
I don't know if it did.
No. Be the exception.
What do you know about attachment theory?
I mean,
all the work that you've done.
It's interesting because when we get down to the technical, like when you start talking about it, I'll be like, oh, I know exactly. I know what she's talking about. I know what she means. But if you ask me to explain it, I'll be like, I know about the 5 love languages, and I know about codependency. That was what I first thought of. Right. Was codependency. I had read I love you, don't, or no, I hate you, don't leave me, and codependent no more.
Right.
And they weren't really, actually, my therapist didn't give them to me for me. He gave them to me for other people in my life that he felt like maybe this was what was going on. And I saw a lot of myself in it as well. And I was like, and then I started learning about trauma and how we have unhealthy ways to attach to people.
Yes.
But I couldn't give you the technical terms for it. What I found is that I mirror a lot, even though it seems like a healthy relationship, I mirror a lot of those unhealthy relationships from my childhood.
Right.
Because that's how I learned to attach to people.
Absolutely.
So I've just learned how to make it now in a healthier way through, thankfully, better quality people, first of all, but also my own work through my trauma therapy and me learning how to set some boundaries and advocate for myself in ways that I couldn't before. So that's about what I can tell you in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. That's
about,
great.
What I know about.
A lot of people don't necessarily know what that means.
And that Keith and I are opposite attachment styles.
Oh, yeah.
Which is typically, that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty common. I learned about that in our couples therapy. Yeah.
And I mean, it's cool once, I shouldn't say it's always cool. It's disheartening, but validating, but then cool. Once you learn what your attachment style is, and then you really understand where that comes from, how that was kind of developed in you. Like you weren't born that way. That was kind of how you were raised. And then throughout your own growth and healing and transformation and maturity and everything of that nature, then you end up with a better attachment style. So just because you start with one doesn't mean you finish with one.
Right. I was thinking about that even with love languages, because my love language in the when my attachment style was more unhealthy was one way,
Right.
and now it's different.
Yes.
And so the way that you interact, love language is part of it, because it's how you communicate your needs.
Yeah.
And how you feel love from other people. Because if somebody else is like into gifts, but you're not, and they're giving you a bunch of gifts, you might be like, why are they giving me all these gifts?
Right.
Like, that's not what I care about. I know that's how my mom was big on gifts. And that was not how I felt love.
Right. But obviously you learn that somehow that was important for her.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just like your love languages evolve, like your attachment style evolves.
It does, yeah.
Which is really cool. And I wanted to kind of talk about like attachments, because your attachment style goes hand in hand with like your childhood. So much like your childhood trauma goes hand in hand with like your adulthood relationships, how you show up for the world, how you interact with the world itself, but then also a reflection of yourself. Like attachments do the same thing because they're formed in the early years. So John Bowlby, apologies, said his name wrong, created like attachment theory in the 1950s, and then it was expanded on later. But attachment theory basically outlines the bond with your primary caregivers, sets the foundation for how you then navigate your life. So whether you have like caregivers that are there, they're very nurturing, loving, and caring, caregivers that are kind of distant, but you're still kind of getting your needs met, caregivers that are completely awful and terrible. And so all of those teach you how to then live through the rest of your life. And they don't change until you want to change them, until you realize them. So the primary goal of an infant is to maintain proximity to like its caregiver. Like
Right.
That's how any kind of animal survives. Like I need to know where the mom is in order to get the milk from the mom, like any baby. Whether it's an animal or human, like knows that instinctively. But then as obviously we've evolved over time, like we need to kind of better understand like what strategies are allowing us to remain close to our parents or caregivers and what strategies are not. And a lot of that comes from how our parents are showing up for us in a lot of different ways. And there's been a ton of studies spanning decades that kind of show the correlation between trauma in childhood, which we know includes emotional abuse, emotional neglect, physical abuse, physical neglect, sexual abuse, and sexual neglect, is what causes any type of the forming attachment traumas to kind of be present in your adult relationships. Yes, ma'am.
And this can happen if you're an infant who is colicky and doesn't have needs met for the first year of your life because your parents can't handle it and they walk away.
Right.
And then your parents become incredibly attentive and loving because you become easier to deal with for whatever reason. You hold it, you start suppressing your emotions, you start holding things in. You can develop these kinds of attachment disorders early on, even though your parents are, from what you remember, loving.
Right.
Because you may not remember when that, we're talking 0 to 6, 7-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Some say 6, some say 7, but we're talking that 0 to 6-ish range. And you may not remember necessarily when that trauma happened, or
True.
if God forbid it's a sexual molestation.
Right.
And it happened when you're 0, 1, 2, 3. You may not remember that.
True.
I know that was true for myself, but it doesn't mean that you wouldn't experience repercussions from it.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You just won't know where they come from. Like, why do I keep thinking this way? Or like, why do I keep feeling this way? Like, my parents were great. I had everything. They were wonderful, loving, caring, nurturing parents.
Right.
And the only way you're going to really find out is to be able to sit down with them and be like, what kind of baby was I?
Yeah, because
like, what was I like when I was little? And they could be like, oh, You were super colicky, like you had every rash under the sun, like it was really hard for us to engage with you.
And also they'd have to be honest about what kind of parent they were.
Yes. Yeah.
They'd have to be able to say, like, I couldn't handle it. And you were left in your crib for a long time crying sometimes. Right. You know?
And if our parents are not healthy parents, they're not going to be able to explain that to us.
Right.
They're going to be like, I don't know what you're talking, like you were the perfect, most wonderful baby. But on the inside, you're like, but there's something missing. And I don't know what that is. Until some obscure relative at some point in your 60s tells you, of course you wouldn't remember this. And you're like, oh, all the pieces kind of start falling into place like a Jenga puzzle or not a Jenga, but like a Sudoku. What are those things called? Tetris. Like a Tetris. And you're like, oh, okay, that makes so much more sense now.
Yes.
So much more sense now.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So there's 4 different types of attachment styles. There's secure, avoidant, anxious, and disorganized. So avoidant, anxious, and disorganized also have a couple of other names, and I'll get to those. And one of them is a secure attachment style, the secure one. And that just means that as a child, you were able to consistently rely on your caregivers to fulfill your needs as you were growing up. That's it. Like they were consistent with following through with your needs. They were consistent in taking care of you. Like you didn't have to wonder or worry what was going to happen next because you kind of knew.
Doesn't mean they didn't ever make mistakes. Doesn't mean nothing bad ever happened. But it means that for the most part, you knew what you could expect from those people. Yes. You knew that even if there was, I've read about this before, like even if you, say your house burned down, but your parents handled it in a really secure, attached, helped you process your feelings. You may not end up with any kind of real trauma. You may remember it. It's like that was a horrible thing. But because you had that secure attachment, it's not, with your parents, it's not going to affect you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And ultimately, like, you'll be able to see relationships as a safe space where you can express your emotions freely. You're able to have open, honest conversations, all the things we want, but none of the things we ever knew. Insecure, the other 3 styles. And so this opposite. They develop if a child has a strained bond with their caregivers. So this is what happens when a child may learn that they're not able to rely on others to fulfill basic needs and comfort. So like food, water, shelter, clothes, like your basic needs, but then also, safety, comfort, some sort of love, some sort of attention that we need to grow. I was going to start with secure, but we're going to end with secure. So I'm going to skip over to avoidant. So avoidant is also classified as like dismissive avoidant or anxious avoidant. So these are all words for the same insecure attachment style. It's defined by failures to build long-term relationships with others due to an inability to engage in physical and emotional intimacy. So in childhood, you may have had like strict or emotionally distant or absent caregivers. Your parents may have left you to fend for yourself, expected you to be independent, reprimanded you for depending on them, rejected you when you were expressing any kind of needs, and been really slow to respond to your basic needs. Some of these parents can be like outright neglectful, but others are just simply busy, slightly disinterested, and more concerned with other things like your grades or your chores, or manners, instead of like being able to let you share your hopes and your dreams and your feelings and your fears. Like they want you to focus on very specific things. And so I've seen this in like a lot of like Asian families that I've worked with. Like the focus is not on emotions. It's not on expressing your emotional needs or being able to share in those. It's on grades. It's on jobs. It's on being a very specific way for a very specific reason, which is why there's a lot of more of like anxious avoidant type individuals. Some of the signs that you are an anxious or anxious avoidant have an attachment style that's anxious or anxious avoidant.
Ooh, let's hear them.
Let's hear them. Persistently avoiding emotional and or physical intimacy. Like, you don't want it. Because if I let somebody in, I don't trust that they're going to help me. They're going to take care of my needs. They're going to do anything that's going to be good to me. So I'm just going to keep you at arm's length. A strong feeling of independence, which doesn't sound bad, right? Like, I can take care of myself. I don't need to rely on anybody else.
You can't tell me what to do.
You can't tell me what to do. But in reality, like, the more independent we are, the less connected relationships we have, because we've learned I cannot rely on people.
Right.
Super uncomfortable expressing feelings, super dismissive of others, hard time trusting, feeling threatened by anyone who tries to get close to you, because what do they want from me? It's not going to be anything good.
Mm-hmm.
Spending more time alone than interacting with other people, believing you don't need others in your lives, and obviously commitment issues. So in a relationship, this is how you show up. You're going to tend to navigate your relationships at arm's length, just like I said. The need for emotional intimacy is lacking. So romantic relationships are not able to reach any kind of level of depth, because a lot of times, like, you need that intimacy, that sexual portion of a relationship to reach a deeper level of depth, a deeper level of trust. A lot of times they won't allow romantic partners to engage with them. They avoid getting close emotionally. Partner may feel as though they will never get inside and will always be stonewalled or dismissed when the relationship feels too serious, which tends to happen. So avoidant partner, if I start to feel like you're getting a little bit more serious and it's time for me to end things, it's time for me to move on, because I do not need that in my life. Like, no, thank you. I'm going to go find somebody else that's a little less emotionally available than you are in order to move forward. So if you kind of look back at, like, some of the people that are in your lives and you're like, oh, okay, I can see, like, how that person might have that, or how that person might have that. Like, it starts to make more sense.
Right.
The next one is anxious attachment style, also known as resistant, anxious ambivalent, or anxious preoccupied. Before you started therapy and did all of your work, this was your attachment style.
Okay.
So let's learn a little bit more about what pre-therapy Joanna was like.
Let's find out.
So this is characterized by a fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, depending on a partner for validation and emotional regulation. This is where codependency comes in.
Almost flipped your.
So a lot of people are like, oh, I'm codependent, I'm codependent, I'm codependent, without really realizing what that actually means. When you are holding on to somebody so tightly because you're afraid to be alone, you're afraid to be rejected, and you need that validation and emotional regulation from another person, you're codependent. The antidote for codependency is boundaries, but that's a whole different other podcast. So this anxious style stems from inconsistent parenting, which we know you had. These children have difficulty understanding their caregivers.
Also weird.
No security for what to expect from them on any given day. Often confused with their parental relationships and feel unstable. Children with this attachment style experience very high distress when their caregivers leave, because I don't know what's going to happen when you leave, so you should just stay here. Sometimes parents will be supportive and responsive to the kids' needs, while at other times be completely out of touch with what you need. So some of these parents may have also kind of alternated between being overly coddling or super detached and indifferent. Been easily overwhelmed, which, I mean, some parents are. What parent isn't easily overwhelmed in some way, shape, or form? Sometimes attentive, but then often push you away. Made you responsible for how they feel. Well, it's your fault I'm feeling this way. Right. It's your fault I'm crying because you hurt my feelings. You're 4 years old. I'm the adult, but you hurt my feelings, and I need you to take responsibility for that.
If you didn't act this way,
If you didn't act this way, I wouldn't have to do
be
this.
feeling you are driving me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we grow up like hearing those messages. So that's where the love me, don't leave me comes from. Like, I hate you, but don't leave me. Like, I want you close, but also get away.
Right.
Like, and you don't know how to manage that or balance that because that's what you were raised in. So you have no idea what to truly trust, what's safe, what's not safe. And I think it was last podcast, when you were talking about like sitting on the couch watching TV, and then the stepdad like came up and that whole situation happened. Because in that moment, you're like, nobody's here. I'm okay. I'm safe.
Right.
But then as soon as you realize he was there, like you had no idea what kind of mood was going to happen. So you just immediately are trying to figure out, like, do I go docile and limp? Do I fight back? What do I do? Are they going to be in a good mood? Are they going to be in a bad mood? Like, you are constantly walking on eggshells when you have these types of caregivers. You have no idea what kind of mood mom's going to be in, dad's going to be in, grandma, whoever the primary caregivers are. If you can't trust that mood, you start to just develop this anxiousness in you.
Right.
And the anxiousness keeps building. But then at other times, they're super loving and super attentive. And you're like, this is good.
Right.
I just have to remember how to be this good. So they keep doing this.
If I do this, I'm doing something right. And it's usually that it would usually, in my experience, be attached to a behavior and like grades. I'd drawn a art project. I'd gotten on the honor roll. I'd won patches in Girl Scouts, like some kind of achievement. And it usually had to do with a public display as well.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't typically like I came home and at home I got the praise.
No.
It was
out in public.
Right.
Because we need to present this picture to the world.
Right.
But at home, it's a very different picture. So then that also confuses kids. Because when we're out in public, like everything's great. Like parents are attentive. We're having a great time. We're at Disneyland. We're living up. It's great. And as soon as we get back to the hotel room, now everyone's getting smacked around or the parents are losing their shit. Like, I don't know what happened. Like, we just had a good time. And it takes a really long time for you to realize that it's the presentation of the outside world that your parents caregivers needed the world to see them a certain way, but inside the home, that's where the reality was. And it's confusing because kids are like, I don't understand the two.
Right.
Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
I already said that. And so ultimately, these kids grow up thinking they're supposed to take care of other people's feelings, which then leads to codependency. Like, it's my job to make sure that you are okay, because if you are okay, you are then going to make me feel okay.
I'll be okay.
But oftentimes it doesn't happen. You can keep making everybody feel okay, but nobody's really giving you exactly what you need in return because they don't know how to. Right? You don't know how to because this is just your norm. So some of the signs. Did you have any of these? Clingy tendencies.
No.
She says no, with sarcasm.
Yes.
Highly sensitive to criticism, whether it was real or perceived.
Yeah, I still burst into tears on some level, depending on who it is.
Needing approval from others.
You should fuck off right now.
He says I can fuck off. Jealous tendencies.
Yes.
Difficulty being alone.
Yeah.
Low self-esteem.
Still, yeah.
Feeling unworthy of love.
Yeah. Yeah. Still a struggle.
Intense fear of rejection.
Yeah. Used to have it. Yeah.
So, like, not even like, I don't want to ask this boy or this girl out on a date because I don't want to be rejected, but like the intensity, like, I can't be rejected because if I'm rejected, then I'm nothing. Like,
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely played a part in some ways, when it came to the relationship with my caregivers.
Right.
But I also had a big fear of like rejection and conflict in any kind of way.
Yeah.
And that led to like, bill paying and things like that. If being late on a bill and having to call somebody and just not being able to handle like what they were saying or how they were saying it or whatever. It's very different than it is now.
Like, it's not just rejection of like from a partner, but like rejection in any way, shape, or form.
Yes.
Like, someone's going to see you as defective, therefore I cannot let them see me as defective in any way across any board.
I mean, even like I can remember things like being in a store and you're busy looking at something and you're in somebody's way and then somebody's like sharply, like, ma'am, excuse me, and me being immediately, I'm so sorry, and going immediately to the apologetic. And then, I mean, I don't do that shit anymore, but I used to definitely you tried to people please. That was what you tried to do, was you were always trying to figure out how to keep everybody happy.
Yes.
Because then people wouldn't get mad at you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Significant fear of being abandoned.
Yeah. I used to ask Keith all the time. Like, I just don't know when this, like, and not all the time, but every once in a while I would say, like, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't know why you're sticking around.
Right.
I don't understand it, and I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Basically, he was always real cool about it, but
and difficulty trusting others.
Yeah. I think I still struggle a little bit with that one on some levels, but.
And how this kind of shows up in your relationships when you have this anxious attachment style. You tend to usually feel unworthy of love, the need to have constant reassurance from your partner. You often tend to blame yourself for challenges in the relationship and can exhibit frequent and intense jealousy or distrust due to poor self-esteem. Ultimately, there's a deep-rooted fear of being abandoned, being rejected, or being alone. And these fears typically kind of express themselves throughout the signs. But it can be worked on. Like, it can absolutely be worked on. All of these can be worked on.
As it was. And I mean, before we talk about it, we should talk about I redid the assessment and came back as secure. Yes, this time. So, although I do have some of these tendencies there, before they were at a 90 and now they're at like a 20.
Right.
So some of them may be with me for life. Some of them are gone. Like, I'm definitely not as clingy, or I really don't feel like I'm clingy at all. I just feel like, you can do your own thing because I don't like conflict.
So the more we grow and the more we learn about ourselves and the more we understand and the more we let things heal inside of us and we'll give ourselves the grace and the attentiveness that we need, then we're able to kind of step back from it. And some of that obviously is achieved like even doing EMDR, because there's an innate need in you that's lacking. EMDR works with that. DBT works with it. CBT, CPT, like all of them work with it to slowly change how you show up for the world, but also how you show up for yourself. Right. The last insecure one is disorganized attachment. So this is described as having extremely inconsistent behaviors. So it's most common causes of disorganized attachment style are the childhood trauma, neglect, or abuse. Fear of their parents. Their sense of safety is also present. Children with this attachment style may be confused. Caregivers are inconsistent and are often seen as sources of comfort and fear by their children, which tend to lead to like disorganized behaviors. So this would be the more severely abused you were in any way. So you have like all of the emotional abuses and the emotional neglects, the physical abuses, the physical neglects, the sexual abuses, the sexual neglects, like all of them more often than not. And then the rare gleam of hope. So I'm not saying that all serial killers had this type of like parent, that their parents raised them to be these types of people. But if you look back through some of their childhood histories and you read what type of parents some of these people had, it's like, oh, because you're not born a natural killer, but a natural killer can be created. Through you constantly beat a dog enough, a dog's eventually going to bite somebody. Like, it's just going to happen. Some of the signs for disorganized attachment, obviously a fear of rejection, but a big one is like inability to regulate emotions, contradictory behaviors. So you never know. You never knew how anybody else was feeling, thinking, or going to act. So you now no idea how you're thinking, feeling, or going to act. Like, no, there's no consistency in yourself. So you're constantly doing the opposite of what you think you're doing. Obviously, levels of anxiety, difficulty trusting people. You have both attachment, avoidant, and the anxious attachment style. So you have elements of both in there based on your parents. A lot of mental health issues and concerns, like mood disorders, a higher proponency for mood disorders, personality disorders, self-harm, and substance use disorder. Doesn't mean you're going to end up a serial killer. Please do not take that into context, and this is what's going to happen, because that is not the case. It was just an example of severe trauma as children. Mm-hmm. In a relationship, people with disorganized attachment, you're going to tend to show up to have more unpredictable and confusing behavior. Again, like your partner's not going to know what way's up or down. You're going to alternate between kind of being aloof and independent, and then you're going to be clingy and super emotional. Desperately seek love, but yet you push away everybody because you fear love. You believe you're always going to be rejected, but you don't avoid emotional intimacy because you want that constant connection with someone. But the fear of rejection and that you're never really going to be loved causes you to kind of do that push and pull a little bit more intense. They tend to seek out rejection over and over and over because that's what felt normal to them when they were growing up. And they can perceive their partners as unpredictable and themselves behave in unpredictable ways. So, like, crazy begets crazy. So the more crazy you are, and I don't use crazy as a clinical term, I'm just saying, like, let's just say you're super, like, eccentric, and you're chatty, and you're talkative, and you're just always out there because that's the kind of person you are, you're going to tend to attract those people. So, like finds like. Mm-hmm. So the same thing, like if you have a disorganized attachment style, you're going to find other people that also have some kind of attachment that's not healthy, right? Because you can't be in a healthy relationship. One, because you fear it, you're going to reject it anyway. But then two, somebody healthy comes up to you, all the bells and whistles are going off telling you danger, danger, danger. Because you don't know any different, because you've never had something like that solid enough in your life to trust that maybe this is a green flag instead of a red flag. If that makes sense. Yeah. Then we circle back to our secure attachment style, which you completed that assessment too, to look at like how you're feeling about things today now based on everything that you've been throughout your whole treatment process, right? And your own self-growth, actualization, healing, grace, all of the things you've given yourself, right? And you ended up being able to have a secure attachment style now, right? Doesn't mean that you don't struggle with some of those other little pieces, right? But now it's more secure with your relationship. Excuse me. So secure attachments, like I said, you felt secure with your caregivers from childhood, and you're able to ask for reassurance or validation without any punishments. Like you're able to say, does this dress look pretty on me? And then be like, oh my gosh, you look super cute in that dress, versus like, no, that is ugly. You look fat, go change it. And then you're like, okay, well, does every dress make me feel or look ugly and fat? Or is it just this one? Like you learn to not trust. You felt safe, understood, comforted, and valued during your early interactions with your caregivers. And your caregivers were probably emotionally available and were more aware of their own emotions and behaviors. So kind of looking at like how our parents raised us and then how we chose to raise our kids.
Right.
Like, okay, I know exactly how my mom and dad would react if I brought this to them. You need to be better. How are you going to be better for your kid? And you're doing things differently. So you're showing up in a healthier, better way, even though you don't realize it because you don't know any different. You just know I need to be opposite. I need to be opposite. So some of the signs: you have a secure attachment style, ability to regulate your emotions, but you're able to do that a lot better.
Okay.
Easily trusting others, not trusting everybody.
Right.
Because trusting everybody is
I used
not
to trust nobody. And now I trust.
like being able to like feel like I can trust this person.
Right.
It's going to be fine.
Exactly.
Having more effective communication skills, ability to seek out emotional support, whether you get that from your partner or from other people, you're able to be like, I just need to talk to someone that's going to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't have done that before because nobody's going to understand. They're just going to reject you.
Right.
More comfortable with being alone, and not like alone because you're alone, but like, I like my personal space.
I like to be alone sometimes.
Yeah, I just like to chill, be all in my own space, and I'm okay and comfortable in it.
Sometimes I'll look at Keith, I'll be like, why don't you upstairs and play video games? And it just look at me, I'm like, just don't freak. You don't have to.
I'm just saying you could if you wanted to.
I'm fine being alone.
Fine being alone.
You haven't got to play in a while.
Ability to self-reflect in partnerships. So being able to say, okay, I overreacted.
Yeah.
I should not have yelled. I got upset because
that's a big one that I've been able to do. Yeah.
Like being able to take your own accountability in things in a way you couldn't before, versus blaming yourself. This is all my fault. I know I did everything wrong. I'm so sorry. That's the codependency to people please, versus like, you're right. I should not have yelled. I apologize for yelling. Doesn't mean you have to apologize for the words that were said, because maybe those hold true, but apologizing for how you reacted in the moment and being able to own that piece. Being comfortable in close relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Easily connecting with people. Ability to manage conflict a lot better. Higher self-esteem. And ability to be emotionally available. Doesn't mean you're going to have every single one of these signs. So don't get me wrong. You're not going to have every single sign.
Right.
But one of these is going to fit you more than the other.
Right.
When you are going through, so obviously you started out with the avoidant, the anxious attachment style. And now you've grown into the secure attachment style. Where do you think the biggest shift happened in you, where you started to actually believe good things about yourself instead of the opposite, bad things about yourself?
Well, because they overlapped, it's hard to tell which one it was. I think it had to do when I was doing EMDR and DBT together.
Okay.
And I did them at kind of the same time. And I just remember like having a couple of sessions where I could feel things shifting inside of me as I was reprocessing the memory and letting my thoughts formulate about what that memory meant to me.
Right.
And then also going into dialectical behavioral therapy and learning about like distress tolerance and emotion regulation and mindfulness and things that I really felt like, wow, I got let down as a kid.
Right.
And maybe this wasn't all your fault.
Yeah.
Maybe you were really just failed as a kid. And the fact that I remember having this conversation with myself, like the fact that I made the decision when I was aware that there was a problem and I made the choice to go to therapy, and then I've stuck with it for 10 years done different kinds because this one isn't giving me what I need. Let me go find something that
Yeah.
Okay, let me do the next, something suggested to me. I will try that. You think I need to try medication? I will first let me try these therapies. Not working. Let's give the medication a shot. And all of those things together for me ended up getting me to a place where I could realize, like, man, I just keep stepping up for myself.
Yeah.
In ways that people in my past hadn't, I did have people. I mean, my grandparents were wonderful. I had people in my life that were pillars. Sure. That were just wonderful, especially those that were down south. I had a wonderful, loving community down there. But, and it's not, like you said, it's not like I never had good times with my parents.
Right.
That wasn't the case, but to consistently be able to step up for myself whenever I was stumbling or struggling and realizing that was the choice I was making, I think that was the big shift.
Yeah.
And it happened during those two, together. So.
Because oftentimes, like, we just do things, like we just react.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know that we're actually making a choice because it's become second nature.
Well, I had therapists too who were like, hey, you're doing great work. And I don't have clients who normally do this work. And
right.
Like, wow, that's amazing. And I want you to pay attention to what you've realized.
Yeah.
They kept bringing me back to, like, they wouldn't let me dismiss it. They wouldn't let me just go, oh, it's, that's no big deal. What's the next thing?
I do the same thing with my clients.
Weird.
It's
like it works or something.
Exactly.
It's like you're a good therapist.
I try to be. And you had mentioned something earlier before the podcast when we were talking about, like, some uncomfortable feelings you were having with your new EMDR therapist.
You mean
based on some things she was telling you?
Okay, you're gonna have to, I have a 50-year-old brain now. It doesn't work.
It's not 50 yet, Linda.
Listen, I thought about this today. The cell has already been alive for 50 years and started dividing.
That's fair.
So technically, my essence has been alive for 50 years.
That's fair.
And that's why everything is breaking already, even though I'm not already 50.
She was complimenting you.
Oh, about all the, she was complimenting me about all the great work that I've done and stuff. And it was uncomfortable because I just wanted to, dismiss it. And I wanted to say, it's no big deal. Partially because I'm so used to doing this work.
Right.
But also, because if I give myself credit, then I'm giving myself love that I'm not used to receiving. And it's hard for me to do that because I don't believe I deserve love unless I'm perfect. So I'm in therapy because I don't feel like I have figured everything out. Not that I would be there forever, but I've got some big stuff that I'm still working on.
Sure.
And so I'm dealing with this dichotomy between really needing a therapist, needing professional, and that professional telling me, "Man, you're doing an incredible job. You're doing," and me wanting to be like, "Well, I'm here," but I know why I'm there. So yeah, that's what that was about. It has to do with just, I think, accepting praise is difficult.
Mm-hmm. True.
From anyone, even myself.
I think it's the hardest from ourselves.
Yeah.
Especially if we grow up with unhealthy
You're
parents.
making my neck all tight.
Welcome. I told her it was going to be a little bit like therapy today.
Yeah, you owe me a massage.
But like we don't grow up with healthy parents, like we're healthy caregivers. I keep saying parents.
We're used to that.
Just please know, like, it's whomever took care of, was your primary caregiver.
Exactly.
But if we grow up that way and like we weren't given praise freely, and the only time we were given praise was, like in your case, like when you had an achievement, but it was outside of the home, so other people saw or heard or became aware of said achievement. It's fine.
It's
I
the big
lost
brown
my
van.
total train of thought because the UPS truck pulled up, scared my bejesus out of me. We're not used to the compliments. We're not used to hearing that unless we've done something that is acceptable to somebody else.
Right.
Which obviously with the codependency type behaviors, like I need to constantly do something to get somebody else's acceptance.
Which is funny because I just realized I don't have a problem accepting praise at karaoke where there's everybody around and it's in public. And they clap.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe
it's because it's something I learned. But I just realized that it doesn't make me feel awkward. It's when it's one-on-one and it's personal. And I'm like, I think maybe they see me. I'm like, they don't know me. If they knew, then they wouldn't know. They wouldn't. But I don't really feel that. Like I should say, like, it's on a spectrum.
Yes.
Before I used to feel that way, like 90, 100%. And now I get like the blip of a feeling.
Yeah.
And I told you about it. I shouldn't have fucking told you about it because you brought it up. No, but I get that blip of a feeling.
Yeah.
And then I'm able to immediately like challenge it and go, well, hang on.
Yeah.
Maybe she's complimenting you because you've been doing really good work in therapy for a long time. And you are able to regulate yourself in ways you could not do.
Right.
Even 2 years ago, much less 10.
Absolutely.
So it's stuff like that, but it's still weird to take the compliments. And now I'm figuring out why. In my session on YouTube.
You're welcome for that.
So,
and like I mentioned at the beginning, like just because you start off with one attachment style does not mean that you have to keep that attachment style.
Right. No.
Just because you come from trauma does not mean you have to keep carrying the trauma. Like we say, I feel like almost every session, you got to do the work.
Attachment styles like hair color.
True.
Because you have to keep working at it if you're going to change that color.
Yeah, because if you didn't keep working at that pink and purple situation,
right, the old shit would come back. It would come back.
Yep.
But because I choose to do the upkeep on it, and I do the things, I do the cool showers, and I do all the things that I need to keep it maintained.
Right.
Same thing with your attachment style. When you start learning those new skills, if you keep using them and, you constantly try and challenge yourself, it's not constantly, give yourself a break once in a while, but you're challenging yourself when you're noticing that you're doing unhealthy things, when you're exhibiting unhealthy behaviors, when you're having those unhealthy thoughts, when you're not able to accept praise, even from yourself, and challenging yourself like, okay, I don't feel good about praise, so I'm going to praise myself extra because it feels bad, but that's part of how you get it to feel better.
Yes.
It's using these things, and that's what it is. It's like attachment styles like hair color.
And ultimately, if you're willing to do that for your hair, and you're willing to take care of your hair and put all the effort and time into your hair, why is your hair more important than your own heart and soul?
Right. Right. So that's a
good analogy. I like that.
You're welcome.
So yeah, so that's attachment styles. And I felt it was kind of important, one, because, well, I've known you for 36 years.
36 years.
And so while I haven't seen you every single day for 36 years, but like knowing who you were then and knowing who you are now are two very different people. Like completely different people. And just because you had that then doesn't mean you have this now. But your attachment style was created in you based on how your caregivers cared for you,
right,
or lack thereof.
Right.
which makes it super relevant. Just because there's not like big T's happening all over your childhood,
No.
doesn't mean that you're not having little T's all over your childhood.
Exactly.
And trauma is trauma.
Yep.
So you're still going to shift and morph and change based on those around you and what they give or lack thereof to you, and what they need and what you need from them or lack thereof. Like, as a little kid, you don't know any different.
Mm-hmm.
So all you know is to monitor and mirror and watch these caregivers like hawks
Mm-hmm.
in order to figure out how you are then supposed to navigate your world for the rest of your life.
Yeah. It was hard enough for me to have on the one aspect where I am going through the physical and the sexual abuse and that stuff, but then on the other aspect to at other times or at the same time have a caregiver telling me, you're stupid, you're worthless,
Right.
you're a loser, you know, you should have never been born, you should, like, things that, and not just once, but more than once and repeatedly. And so
Yeah.
eventually as a kid, you just get to where you're like, well, geez, if this person is saying this, then it must be true.
Right.
I mean, why else would they?
Especially coming from someone that is your caregiver.
Right. And that, you know, it can hold true even when it is somebody that maybe isn't a natural born parent,
Mhm.
a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle. It doesn't have to be just your mom or your dad.
Right.
You know, so, and then there's also, I think people forget too that, like, the substance use affects your kids.
Yes.
If you're going to use substances around your kids, then you have to be really mindful about what you're using, how much you're using, if they're seeing it,
Yes.
and how much it's going to affect your behavior. Because if you're going to get a little loose in the lips and say something stupid or thoughtless,
yeah,
because you've had a few too many beers, maybe you don't do that around your kids and
Right.
have your kid pay the price,
right,
so that you can get a little tipsy.
mm-hmm.
You know, and that's something that people who are leveling up,
yes,
are going to take those steps, and hopefully there will be more and more of us. I see a lot of, especially I notice with my daughters, that generation, there are a lot of these kids that are like, no, I'm going to separate. And now I'm not saying there are a lot of them that aren't too, but I've seen
Right.
a lot of them that are like, listen, I'm going to separate the two things, and I'm going to make sure that my kids didn't see the partying,
right,
that I did and my parents did, and
yeah,
you know, so.
absolutely.
And then, I don't know. Yeah, I think each generation is going to fluctuate back and forth, but I really hope that kids start to get more balanced parents so that we don't need
Yeah.
as much of this trauma therapy here.
In order for that to happen, like everybody needs to work on their shit before they have kids.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
work on all your shit, whether you think you have shit or not. Everybody has shit.
And that's the unfortunate thing, is a lot of times people do have families before they even go to work out anything. There's,
Right.
again, the shame, the stigma, all the things, all the reasons why people feel like they don't need help.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need to talk to anybody, and it's embarrassing.
Right.
And I really wish that it wasn't, because therapy has been one of the best experiences of my life.
Yeah.
And I personally have gotten to a place where I'm like, if anybody shamed me for it, I'm just like, you need to just exit. I have no tolerance for it whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because they are clearly in a wounded place themselves. If they're going to be shaming me that would be like shaming me for taking heart medication.
Right.
Or for taking medication for diabetes. Just because you couldn't see that wound or that injury,
Sure,
doesn't mean that there wasn't a test that spelled it out. Doesn't mean that I didn't have it. So
yeah.
I know growing up there was a lot of us, and because like attracts like, I think a lot of us kids who had maybe not the most present parents,
Mm-hmm.
or parents who indulged a little more, ended up being friends.
Right.
And so we saw a lot of that as normalcy.
Yeah.
And then the other side was like, well, we got, the Richie Riches and their parents are home every night. And they're,
Right.
you know, but really it just had to do with their different attachment styles and
Absolutely.
how they learned how to interact with each other.
Absolutely. Because you even look on, like throughout the years, like I would go back and get anybody's name I could remember from high school. That there's not many.
Right.
But going back and you look them up on Facebook. I mean, why don't you? And then you're like, oh, you used to be so mean and so hateful to like every other group.
Mm-hmm.
You just thought your shit did not stink. Now here you are. I wonder what happened to you when you were a kid. Because you're not just going to be a total asshole to be a total asshole.
Right.
You're being a total asshole because someone was a total asshole to you.
Right.
And it just kind of keeps perpetuating.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, I talked about too, like I worked very hard to try not to marry either of my parents. And yet, until I realized it, until my husband started going to his own therapy and I went to my own therapy, he has traits of both of my parents that are, I mean, they're nowhere near on the level that my
Sure.
parents had. And that's why we didn't realize it until he got into therapy and we started uncovering some of it. But
Yeah.
some of it, like, especially like that detached, you know, like my mother,
Yeah.
Keith can be kind of emotionally distant. And that's very similar to my mother.
Right.
And he doesn't mean to be. He just doesn't know how to share his emotions. It has his own, just not learning that.
Right.
He's working on that himself. And then, you know, other things that, I mean, for a long time, I think that pot was probably the main focus of both of our lives.
Right.
And that was my dad. You know, but it was something that when we first started dating, I didn't smoke weed.
Right.
I'd quit for a while. He wasn't smoking. Once in a while he would smoke, and slowly we just got back into the because of life things. And then we kind of have moved back. I still use it, but I've definitely been moving back more out of it. It's something that I would personally like to leave behind, I think, at some point if I could.
Yeah.
Is somebody calling me?
That would be your phone vibrating.
Oh, it's my son, Tyler. We're just going to decline that.
We're just declining that, Tyler.
Sorry, Tyler.
Sorry, Tyler.
I still love you.
But Mama's
so
busy right now.
So much. I'll send him a little in a podcast message. He's probably going to tell me something great or terrible.
I mean, there's a 50% chance of either. There really is. There really is. So, yeah, that's why attachments.
I think that explaining how people get these attachments is important for people to understand. Like, it's nothing that you decide.
No.
You know, because I shared today our thought of the day on our page. And the basic premise of it was, when you're born as babies, you know exactly how much to eat. You cry when you need attention, and it's specific attention. It's not just like, I just want to manipulate Mom to come over and hold me.
Right.
Like you cry because you need a temperature change or something like that. You don't worry about when you're dancing or laughing or somebody's thinking about what they're thinking about me, or if they're going to judge me or whatever. And then we learn from all the people around us. We put all their bullshit on top of us.
Yes.
And that's how we learn how to interact with the world.
Yes.
We don't go out into just the world as like a little baby. We're left to our own devices to figure things out. We would be much more natural, connected to the earth, much less deceptive, and much less judgmental and critical.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, we pick up everybody's bullshit, and that has to do with that attachment style too. Like, that's what's happening, is we are picking up our parents' shit. And not just our parents, but it's any caregivers, like you said. But I had multiple caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily have to be those first early caregivers. It could be someone that's a little bit later on. And,
Sure.
it was still within that first, 0 to 7
Mm-hmm.
that most of them, I think, were introduced for me as far as that type of attachment style.
Right.
But there were still ones later that reinforced that or directed it different ways.
Sure.
And I blamed myself for decades.
You didn't know any different. You thought it was all you.
Yeah.
Because you were taught at such a young age that it was all you.
Well, and that I couldn't control myself.
Right.
Why can't I just get my shit together? Why can't I just control myself? I couldn't control my reactions. I couldn't control my emotional responses. And I often couldn't control my mouth because I would blurt out whatever it was that I was feeling.
Right.
In order to, get my way or whatever it was.
Get some kind of need met.
Yeah. Exactly. Get a need met. So, understanding attachment styles, while it may not be the most sexy of topics for some people, it's really important to realize how that creates that generational trauma.
Yes. Absolutely.
And that you can change that by working on your own attachment style. By first taking some kind of quiz or something with a professional to help you learn how. I mean, you can do it online and do it on your own and just get one and find out, but it's always going to be best to work through this with some kind of guide, whoever that may be.
Right.
Somebody who knows a little bit better than yourself. But any kind of self work like this is going to be beneficial. Learn about your attachment style, learn what it is, figure it out. Don't be afraid of it. Or you're letting your past keep power and control over you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say.
Absolutely.
If you're afraid of learning your attachment style, then you're afraid of learning the truth about what was really done to you when you were younger and facing the reality of what maybe needed to do to change that.
Right.
And it's okay to not be in a place to do that, but just recognize that's what's happening. There's fear that's there.
And knowledge is power. And the more you understand
Absolutely.
yourself and why you do what you do, feel what you do, react the way you do,
Mm-hmm.
the more you're in control, the less anybody else or anything else is in control of you.
That's just it.
Why is it okay for somebody that you care about to live their best life, but it's not okay for you to also do the same?
Well, it comes back to those value and worth issues that are shaped by these attachment styles.
Absolutely.
So the more secure your attachment style, the more you're going to feel like, I deserve good things.
Yeah.
I am a good person and I deserve good things. And the less secure your attachment style, the less you're going to believe that, and the more manipulative you're going to be, and honestly, the more dangerous you may be. It's possible. It's like you said, sociopaths don't have secure attachment styles.
Right.
Not that we're accusing anybody of being a sociopath, but that is the extreme of one end, and then you've got, the other end of the spectrum, which is, I don't know, I guess somebody who's just got a perfect secure attachment style, which
super healthy.
Yeah, super, super healthy. And there are those people out there who are very rarely, my therapist, actually, his wife, he said she's one of the first people he ever met that was just he said, nothing bothers her. It doesn't, if somebody else's opinion doesn't bother her, they don't what they think about it. He said she'll do something for them. And then he'll say, well, what if they don't like it? She'll go, well, then that's their problem. I did my thing. And if they don't like it, they don't like it.
Right.
And I was like, man, can I buy some of that? Can she bottle it? Seriously, I need some.
It's just your own work.
Scratch and sniffs.
It's just your own work.
Yeah. And acknowledging that it's a slow process, but you feel better along the way. Each step, I feel better.
Yeah.
I would never go back. I would never, ever, ever go back. So even though it can be long and tiring sometimes, or it can feel like, I just don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I felt like that when I was emotionally dysregulated too.
Sure.
I felt like that almost all the time. I just don't want to do this thing, which is how I got to be suicidal.
Yeah.
So now I just get like that, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go take a nap. And then I get back up and I feel better.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that if you can just acknowledge that each step along the way is progress that leaves you better than where you were before.
Yes. Always look back to where you were a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. You are not the person you were then. Like, you're completely different now in so many ways.
Well, sometimes you can't.
Growth.
So it's okay to get honest feedback from people too.
Sure.
It's okay to ask people, like, can you help me see the truth of where my growth is?
Yeah. Which is what us therapists do.
True.
When we acknowledge it.
Exactly.
And then I have clients that are like, you have to say that. And I'm like, actually, no, I don't. But let's take a journey back, shall we, to when you first came here.
Right.
I remember what that was like. Do you remember what that was like? And then kind of reminding them all the steps they've taken along the way.
Because you forget.
And then they're like, oh, wow, I have really come a long way. Whether I've been seeing them for 5 years or whether I've been seeing them for 6 months. Like, they're able to see it. And they're like, okay, so now what? And I'm like, you keep doing the work. Like, you have the tools, you have the resources, keep using them. Because if you stop using them and you fall back on old behaviors, then you're just doing yourself a disservice.
Your roots are going to grow out.
Your roots are going to grow out. Exactly. Exactly. I like it. It was a really good analogy. Thank you for that.
I was lucky I got lucky on that one.
You did. You did.
Like the weeds.
Any thoughts, dear sir?
I can't relate to the hair analogy. I gotta be honest with you.
You've never had hair before?
Well, not the last 25 years.
Well,
I mean, there's pictures of it, but
sure. Do you have to do any kind of? Do you have to do any kind of bicking or anything for that hair?
You gotta shave it.
Oh yeah.
That smoothness. Okay.
Same.
So you can relate in some way then. Maybe not to the color.
Like the upkeep and the maintenance.
But the upkeep and maintenance is there.
Yeah, you know, I don't roll out of bed and look this good. It does take a little bit of effort for sure.
It has to.
Listen, you know, one of the things that I love about this whole experience is I get to sit in on impromptu therapy sessions, and so much of what you guys talk about is things that I can relate. You know, full disclosure, I had amazing parents who raised my brother and I the right way, you know, based on morals and responsibilities and being held accountable and all that shit. It wasn't until later on in life where I started to get my own bouts of issues, for the lack of a better term, that subsequently and over the course of time would alter how I trust people. Here I am at 48 years old, and I can count on one hand and still have fingers left over. Well, I wholeheartedly have some degree of trust in. I question everything. And a lot of it is because of the interactions that I have had in previous relationships, intimate ones. Anybody who knows my story on any recent level can speak to this, because I have gotten fucked over in more ways than I even knew were possible. And like for a minute there, like my whole world was just spinning. And like I didn't want anybody around me. Get the fuck away from me. I don't know where you're coming from. I don't know what your intentions are. I'm hearing you, but I'm not believing you. It's not your fault. I know this is a me thing, but until you give me some goddamn space.
Yeah.
Boundaries you talked about. they went up. I'll let you in when I'm goddamn good and ready, and not a moment, but not a moment before that. So I have also learned though that, in my experience, there's a right way and there's a wrong way to handle things. opinions. And much like I have mentioned in previous episodes, things that you two have talked about, I'm like, well, I have done that.
Right.
This is how I did it, or oosh, I should have done it this way. Should have done it that way. But everything is a learning, everything is a learning process. Here I am now, and I am slowly but surely starting to open up various doors of levels of trust based on the individual, based on what they bring to my life, right? So, but it's important, very important, because I know a lot of people that deal with the codependency thing for sure. Like I know a lot of people that, like, when this thing drops, they're getting a direct link to this show. You need to listen to this because this is what you're doing. You may not realize it, but this is what you're doing, and this is why you're doing it. Listen to this show. So you guys continue to bring topics to the table that it's going to resonate with your hardcore listeners, your established fan base, but it also provides me the opportunity to be like, you've not listened to these two women, you need to start, because this is where your issue is, or this is what your challenge is, and this is how I think these two could help you. Listen to this show. So another example of the various levels of your awesomeness, and I'm here for it.
I mean, we aim to please.
Right.
Now that you brought up something interesting, so can you go from secure attachment style to disorganized or a different attachment style based on, let's say, you go through a profound trauma or something like that that's past that 0 to 6 stage?
Typically, no. It's like your attachment style, once you're secure, because like you know what healthy is, you know what good is, you know all of that. We make obviously different choices for the partners or the friendships that we have in our adulthood that then have us questioning ourselves. But even then, like in Jason's example, like he knew what was him and he knew what wasn't him. So let's say you have 15 terrible relationships and he's able to, not just you, Jason, but like if people grow up with a secure attachment style, you're able to kind of separate like, okay, what was actually really me and what was really them. So you're not like absorbing and suddenly becoming codependent because of A, B, or C. You're not suddenly absorbing things and becoming this. So the attachment style doesn't go backwards. Now it's, okay, how did I end up there? What steps did I take to get there? How much leniency was I giving certain people? How come I didn't see the red flag? Like, should I have seen it sooner? Well, no, you didn't know any better. Okay, so they're more forgiving of themselves. They carry less blame of themselves.
I got it. Okay, I got it. There's no internalization.
Right. I mean, initially, yeah, you're going to be like, what the fuck did I do?
Not like that you carry around like an anchor.
Yeah.
A lodestone around your neck that you walk around.
Exactly.
Like a yoke.
Yeah. So, yeah. Thanks for sharing, Jason.
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for.
I like it.
All right. Very good.
No, very good episode, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as we start to wind this episode down, I have a couple of programming notes or a couple of notes I need to make mention real quick. If for those who check out the online store, next week we're doing a complete overhaul and relaunch. And we have switched providers. We have switched to a distributor because the company that I have spent, I don't know, the last 15 years with decided to play their asshole card. So I'm out. And I have found a new platform, a new distributor. So all new merchandise is coming next week. And we will stay tuned to our socials. Every show who has their own Facebook page will get the link. We'll have the graphic to to direct you to this new store. It's been a little bit of a process, but it's been a lot of fun too. And there's things on there that I didn't have available at the time, such as you will start to see Joanna and Natalie flip flops. And there's just so many different things on there that
people can walk on our faces.
Who doesn't want? We don't talk about that swag.
I mean, for real. And like I've come up with a few new designs for you two, and I'm very excited about this new launch. As it stands right now, I think there's like 150 items on there. I've got at least 100 on standby that needs to be uploaded. So,
very cool.
Big relaunch here coming up, and I'm here for it. So. If anybody has any questions, comments, feedback, show topic ideas, anything of the sort, hit up Joanna and Natalie on their Facebook page. Just look for Shh, We Don't Talk About That. Or you can go to pfcnetwork.net, the official website of all of our shows here on our network. And with that, go out, be awesome to yourselves and to each other, and we'll see you next time on Shh, We Don't Talk About That on the PFC Entertainment Network.